Matthew Buckley Smith, and you're listening to SLEERICKETS. Thank you all for listening. Thanks especially to any of you who have taken a moment sometime this week to recommend the show to a friend. That is the way word gets around, and I am grateful for it. Thanks also to everyone who subscribes to The Secret Show. If you would like to get 3 extra episodes of SLEERICKETS a month and access to the Substack chat and some free stickers and a bunch of other, I mean, not a bunch of other stuff, but like occasionally 1 or 2 other things, including the opportunity to ask some guests questions ahead of time, then go to sleerickets.substack.com and join up. You will be welcome, and you will be in very good company. My guest this week is Ashley Anna McHugh, author of Into These Knots, winner of the some year, which, I mean, she was insanely young when she won that prize, but it was a New Criterion Book Award. I mean, not pre-Roger Kimball probably, but like pre-horrifying controversy surrounding said magazine back in the David Yezzi days, back when David Yezzi was the poetry editor, etc. Ashley is such good company. This was so fun to do, and she picked a fantastic topic. She wanted us to talk about the first 3 chapters of The Dyer's Hand by W.H. Auden. I had heard of this book and never read it, and then could not believe how good it is. It is, at least the first 3 chapters are just pure delight. Just like kettle corn, except like when you have that much kettle corn, you stop liking kettle corn. This was the opposite. I just wanted to read more. So I hope you will enjoy our conversation. We get into a few different things. Ashley has some strong opinions about contemporary formal poetry, about any number of other aspects of the poetry world. We talk about who is an Auden, who is a Wilbur, who is an Alice, who is a Mabel, who is an aristocrat, and who is a Democrat. Not the capital D political party, but something much dumber and more entertaining. So I hope you will enjoy the conversation, have as much as I enjoyed having it. And if you'd like to hear the second half, it was a good long conversation. If you'd like to hear the second half, go to sleerickets.substack.com and sign up, because it will be coming out there later this week. That's all I got for you. So here is Ashley Anna McHugh, author of Into These Knots. Was this influenced by Stallings, or just all the other poets who use initials?
I think more of like the modernists a little bit, but also there was some sense that maybe poetry was a boys' club, and it was for a long time. It's not as much anymore.
Yeah, was that something that I mean, I think of you as being exceedingly young. I don't know if we're in the same ballpark, but I think you're younger than I am.
I don't know.
Did you run into a lot of trouble with poetry being a boys' club or any of that stuff?
Not much trouble. Nothing that I could point a finger at, for sure.
Okay.
I think it was just more my impression of anthologies among the generations of writers that I admired. Early 20th century poets tended to be very male. And so even when I was in college, and I'm sure when you look at like the Norton modern and contemporary poetry, it skews heavily male. Yeah. And so I think as somebody
even more heavily white.
yeah, even more heavily white. But I think as somebody who's, admires the canon a lot, like a lot of formalist poets tend to, right? Mm-hmm. Like you start to think, well, maybe there's only so many slots in that kind of category of voice for women versus for men versus, and so I kind of created a sense of competition when I don't think there really actually is one. Like, I think if you were trying to flip one bishop among so many men now, like that wouldn't fly.
No, right.
Just because there are so many more female writers with the means and with the time and with the opportunity to write and publish and dedicate a sincere part of their life to that pursuit.
I think that's right, but I can definitely understand the feeling coming up of like having as the ground on which, like as the shoulders on which you're climbing, they're all male shoulders.
Right. Like I did one of those when I was in graduate school, it was like also around the time Facebook was a thing. And
Mhm.
so it was
Yeah.
like there was some kind of meme that keeps coming up in my memories once a year. It's like, what are the top 10 writers who have influenced your work?
Ah.
Right. And like there was like not a woman among them. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
which
yeah.
is so weird for somebody who's like conscious of the fact that there's like two women in that period who I admire, you know, like who were probably fighting in like crazy odds to be in those
Yeah, yeah.
anthologies that around that time. But of course, it's a different story now.
Like, how do I'm curious, like, because you made a comment in an email about. I assume that you. I don't know. Like, do you think of yourself as a formalist, like, with a kind of a resigned acknowledgement of inevitability, which is my feeling. Like, it's like it's descriptive enough for a thing that is a real thing that, like, fine, I'm a formalist poet, but it's not. I don't feel excited to claim that as a badge of belonging.
No, and I think that's because the people who are excited to claim that as a badge of belonging often use it to gatekeep,
Ah,
right? Like if you're
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah,
formalist
yeah.
poet in a certain set, like it means that you think free verse is bad, or like
Right, right, right.
being too on the nose or too talky or too you're hearkening back to this like day of greatness, right? Which is a fraught thing to do
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
in America right now
I
and
mean,
generally
in,
and more
in
generally,
yeah,
right? Like in the
anywhere, but
90s, it was a
yeah,
fraught thing to
certainly,
do
yeah,
to
yeah,
be
yeah.
passing judgment in that way. So I feel like the gatekeepers have kind of ruined that community in a way of like saying like, oh, you're a poet, what's your favorite sonnet?
Right,
You
right,
know,
right.
like what's the difference between an Italian or English sonnet? Oh, you can't tell
Yeah,
me. I guess you're not a poet,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah. Or
Right,
or
which
the
is
debates
absurd.
over. I was talking to Cameron last night, and like, I could not believe that apparently there's still debates in formalist circles about, like, substitutions, ever or never. Like, what?
I
Really?
know. It like sincerely lit a joy in me when End of These Knots was published for the and like I think my first or second review came out from Able Muse, I want to say. I forget.
Hmm.
Maybe it wasn't Able Muse. I won't throw them under the bus for this. But they called me a semi-formalist,
Oh, okay. All right.
which is, to be fair, I wasn't, a great formalist then, and I still don't really aspire to like have perfect metrical lines. I think that's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
boring.
But
But
semi-formalist is nice, right? Like, it's not
yeah, it's kind of like I'm going to the junior prom,
exactly. Yeah.
like yeah,
You're
I can do a sonnet, but maybe
yeah.
it's not going to be right,
Right.
like
Yeah.
I
You're
kind of like the playfulness of that.
yeah, you're ready for the dance, but you could still go bowling afterward.
Oh,
Right?
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And like would
That's
prefer
nice.
bowling, maybe.
Right. Yeah. In Googling you to try to, like, get up to date, I got a little trace that I could not get anything more out of that suggested that you may have your book placed. Is that true? No?
No,
Okay. All right. Still on the market then. All right. Well,
still on the market.
I'm eager to read it.
Well, maybe one day. I'm still kind of, I think it has structural issues. Like, truth be told, I think if you looked up on me on like JSTOR or whatever, you could read most of the book,
Okay.
right? So the thing is, like, most of it's been published, like 70, 80% of it. And so it's got to be some kind of issue in like the order.
Hmm.
So I keep obsessively playing with that.
It's got to be some kind of issue in the order, in that, like, because it's been published, you would expect
Well, I mean,
that.
I don't think that like all poems need to be published in a manuscript. And
No, no, no. Yeah, of course
I've
not. Of
cut a
course.
lot of
Yeah.
poems that have been published
Sure. Yeah.
just because they don't fit with it or they don't
Right.
hit in the same way that they used to for me.
Yeah. Sure.
But I think the ones that are in there stand, and I believe in them, So I think
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
just not structuring the book where you're meeting the right poems at the right time to tell the story.
No, I mean, yeah, that's certainly, like, my feeling about the order of poems in a book is like my feeling about the ownership of a car. Like, you are never going to improve my opinion of you by showing me what kind of car you drive, but you can diminish my opinion of you showing me what Carlo, so
Right.
I think with
And I
order of
think
poems, like you
there's
don't want it to get in
also,
their way. You don't want to, you don't want them to trip each other up.
right. Like I'll give you an example. Like one poem is happening after a miscarriage, and then the next
Mm,
poem is happening, parenthood has been a good mistake, but hard. Right.
right.
And like those poems shouldn't be side by side.
Right. Yeah,
Like
yeah,
they
yeah.
can both exist in the same relationship in the same book, but like side by side, that's a little tough. So
Yeah.
just kind of going in with like a needle eyed approach to like what is not even just, I used to always just stack the best poems at the front and hope for the best, but now it's like trying to take like a more measured approach, even if that doesn't mean that the height of of the book happens at the beginning, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Were you taught the same thing I was in grad school about the first, second, and last poems in the book?
No, tell me this.
So the thing I was taught was the first poem in your book should be your second best poem. The second poem in your book should be your third best poem, and the last poem should be the best.
Oh no, no, I was
Yeah,
never taught that. I was just
yeah,
taught, they're going to read the first 10 pages and then decide if they read the rest.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I would definitely say like I and enough other people I know flip to the end that like I would say you want your first and last to be strong anchors.
For sure. Yeah, you don't
Yeah.
want to close on a weak note, but it's also so in full disclosure, like I didn't spend 10 years writing one book. Like I wrote a book, it
Okay.
sucked, and so I
Oh,
started another
interesting.
book,
Okay. Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
I'm like currently like trying to think about what can be salvaged out of the second book in a
You're
different
you're you're uh
framework.
you're Donna Tartt then, rather than Jonathan Franzen.
I'm not familiar with novelists.
Okay. Yeah,
I know
sorry.
enough to know that they are novelists.
Yeah, yeah.
But I completely, when I took a practice lit GRE, I got a pure 50%, and I'm absolutely certain that that's because I got all the poetry questions right and all the novelist questions wrong.
That's sort of beautiful.
I live in a very pristine bubble.
Yeah, that's no, that seems that is in its way admirable, and it's consistent with. I was really relieved. I mean, first of all, like I had never somehow I'd never encountered this book. I mean, I'd heard of it, but I'd never read it until you recommended it. And the Dyer's Hand, Auden's, which I didn't realize they're Auden's Oxford lectures.
The first one is, I think there are some criticisms in there. Maybe
Oh,
there is
okay.
Oxford lectures,
It
but I'm
said
not
at
sure.
least this one said
The first,
he.
the
Oh,
making,
okay,
knowing,
including the
judging.
famous lectures. Yeah, 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 yeah. So
Mhm.
not not all of it, but the first one. Yeah, because and he talks. It sounds like a lecture as he's giving it, but he acknowledges in there that poets have a bizarre ignorance, like that they can like know a great deal, but then they just have enormous blank patches. And
Yeah, I think the
yeah,
quote is like, you can trust him on the woods and the leaves, but not the trees.
yep. Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah.
Like,
They might be
and that,
perfect specialists and they might have like big, broad, general thoughts, but yeah,
right.
but they've never read anything written by somebody who
Jonathan
didn't break
Franzen.
lines. Yeah,
No,
exactly.
no. And
Yeah,
the
yeah,
trouble
yeah.
is when I try to, I read it as though it was meant to have line breaks. Like I read at the same pace
Okay.
and with the same intensity of like, oh, he said blue twice on this page. Like that
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah, yeah.
absolutely how I read a novel, and it's just mind numbing. So
So,
I walk
yeah,
away from
yeah.
like a farewell to arms being like, he really liked the color blue. And they're like, absolutely not. That's not the theme of this book.
I was always bad I mean, I love fiction and I love drama as well, but I was always bad at identifying the correct theme of the book, as well as the other one that I was could never do is the author's and what was the author's intention? Like, fuck if I know.
I
I'm
love
gonna come up
that.
with something to write a
On the
good
other
book.
hand, like I did going back to the GRE, I took it drunk the first time and got a perfect score on the writing section just by making up quotes from Toni Morrison. So like,
You chat GPT did.
well, I just made them up.
No, that's
I
what chat
knew.
GPT does. It makes up quotes.
Oh, does it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If you give it a thesis
Excellent.
and ask for a quote from somebody, it will fit a quote to your purpose.
I
So that's
love that.
great. That's brilliant. Yeah,
That's
well done.
perfect. Yeah. I knew the name of her book and I knew kind of what it was about. So I just kind of paraphrased what I knew, but I put it in quotes for sure. And it seemed persuasive, I guess.
And you were, I mean, you were. a good enough drunk young writer that you could fool the readers of the GRE into thinking you were Toni Morrison for at least
Yeah,
a
I
sentence or
was
two at a time.
I was a complete nihilist. Yeah, I was just like, who cares?
I yeah,
I think the GRE readers and I connected on that level. Like we were just like, okay, this is a
fuck
thing
this
we're
shit.
doing.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. This is all fraudulence, but let's just proceed through it. Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
just pretend it's not.
Yeah, I definitely understand why Ryan reported. I think it was in an AWP conference he met you, and he reported like having some drinks with you and being like, ah, like this is a woman I understand. Like we like she made.
He's so great.
Speaking of which, are you actually? My wife was asking, are you going to be at AWP this year? Are you an
Um,
AWP person?
I am not a person, so
Okay,
probably not.
yeah,
I'm a lizard suit. Where is it this year?
Kansas City, I think.
Oh, maybe then. Yeah, that's
Okay,
close. I might go to that.
where are you at? Are you in Oregon?
Memphis.
Oh, Memphis. Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were in Arkansas, but Memphis. Okay.
I was in Arkansas for a long time.
And you are part of your pristine bubble has been avoiding the academy.
Yeah.
That's
I don't know if that
yeah,
was, it wasn't like a purposeful choice of mine, but like I
right.
graduated right, not when the market went under for the housing
Right.
bubble,
Yeah,
but,
yeah, yeah.
and then higher ed just never bounced back.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. Like, yeah, if and when I could ever get a job in academia, it's like I have taken it or would have taken it, but yeah, that's
Right.
just not been in the cards. Um,
It's just not, and at this point in my life, it's not realistic, like that
no,
I'll
no,
get
no.
a like as a job, that I'll get a comparable, you know, like not a 5-5 load or like a comparable amount of time to spend on writing or
Yeah.
I don't know. I miss it in some sense because I miss having poetry like at the center of my day-to-day life, like reading
Yeah.
it, writing it, talking about it, teaching about it, going to readings. But as far as like the real like Comp 102, taking attendance, doing grade books on
Oh
essays,
God,
like
yeah, yeah.
none of that.
Going to meetings, going to like doing the parts of being a teacher that are not teaching that just
Yeah,
is
service and yeah.
Jesus fuck that.
Are
Yeah.
you in the academy?
No, 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 no. I have taught at handful of colleges at a handful of times, and I'm if somebody offered me a gig, I would certainly take it. But no, I'm not.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think my retirement plan is just to get like a Windstream trailer and go from visiting gig to visiting gig
that is
and like
yeah.
intentionally never take a job and just like drop in, like be like, oh, this sucks, and then move somewhere else.
Yeah, that is. I mean, I think that's like Caitlin Doyle's whole career plan. She's been doing
Oh,
that for like
really?
15 years now.
Yeah, she
Uh,
has been doing a lot
yeah.
of visiting stuff.
I mean, I think that's basically like I think that's her year-round residence is like a series of visiting gigs.
Okay, well, I can apprentice from her then. I can learn the ways.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. She definitely will have some ninjutsu to teach you when it comes to applying for residencies.
I love that.
So I did we definitely have like a bunch of dry and I confess I got to like the last 2.5 pages of the third of the pieces we were reading, but I thoroughly enjoyed everything in there.
Yeah.
I did want to ask you though, because you said this tantalizing thing in an email. You said that you believe all formalist poets are Wilburs or Audens.
Yes.
Okay. I I have thoughts about what that could mean. I have a fear that it might not be a perfectly balanced pairing of options,
Well, let's
but
hear it. Let's hear it.
hear what I think it might mean.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, all right. So Wilbur's great. I don't know if only because he has lived so much more recently. I mean, his lifespan goes way back, but he just died fairly recently because he lived such a long time.
Yeah, he did.
Uh, I feel less confident placing him in the same sphere as Auden yet, just because like he
Yeah.
hasn't been dead long enough.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I think like in a way, like Auden is a bad backdrop against which to place Wilbur because I think it probably brings out some of Wilbur's shortcomings. Like he's Auden is way funnier than Wilbur for one thing. Wilbur is it begins like they both loved riddles, which I don't love, but like Auden's riddles were maybe less embarrassing than Wilbur's. I
Oh,
think,
we're going to riddles.
yeah, Wilbur probably cared about, they both care about both things, but Wilbur probably cared more about meaning and Auden more about language.
Hmm.
Like Auden here, I think for Auden, like playing with language for playing with language's sake is the higher is more sacred than conveying meaning. And I think Wilbur clearly loved playing with language, but I think like he seems to care more about meaning. I mean, Wilbur's more sincere, he's more wholesome. I think like I've been warned against making jokes about the afterlife because I know a lot of my listeners are Christians. With at risk of offending somebody, I will just say that I think if heaven is real and will, then the only reason I can think of that Wilbur would not currently be in heaven is that he would be like cheerfully trundling a blackout drunk Auden up the mountain of purgatory while whistling the song from Bridge on the River Kwai. Like
I
I
think
think,
that's homophobic.
is that homophobic? Wait, what's
Just
homophobic? Oh, fuck. Damn it. I was going to say, well, like I was worried about being homophobic because like one of the things I loved so much about reading these excerpts from the Dyer's Hand was that like I have such a sweet tooth from all my years in theater for like a certain flavor of catty gay banter, and this is just this just hits that so on the nose. Like this is so
yeah,
perfectly delicious in just that precise way.
it's
And I like
ideal.
even in like having that fondness, I think like, is that fondness in itself? It's like, oh well, not all gay people are funny, not all gay people are, but like whatever that is, boy, he nails it. Boy, he just like
Oh
hits
yeah.
it out of the park.
So
But yeah,
I
I
will
want to
just
know.
say
So you
like,
tell me.
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
So if we want to swap out Auden for somebody more time appropriate, I would put Walcott versus
Oh, Walcott versus
Wilbur.
Wilbur. Oh, Walcott. That's like a
Walcott
wild. All
falls
right.
to me like very clearly in the Auden school.
Okay. All right. Not, yeah,
Whereas,
definitely not wholesome in the same way that Wilbur's wholesome, for one thing. Yeah.
yeah, and I'll say that for me, the Auden school is defined and, goes, it's maybe not, maybe we can separate it out from the names of the poets even. But
But you also love Auden. So like that's like
I
and
adore
you yeah,
Auden.
and
Yeah,
you
this is
said
like
like
a
you said you
defining
were an
thing.
Auden. So like give me the Auden
Ideally,
case.
I
Yeah,
hope to be an
give
Auden.
me the Auden versus Wilbur case. I want to
Um,
hear how
so
what distinguishes these things.
Auden for me is like more intellectual for one, but never forgetting the emotional consequences of the intellect, right? So it's
Yeah.
emotionally based, but it has intellectual repercussions that then have to be balanced, right? Whereas
Yeah.
Wilbur's poetry seems to me a little bit more indulgent in the sense
Okay.
that it's an emotion that has real anchors in your heartstrings and in
Yeah, yeah.
reality, but doesn't have to be intellectually balanced.
So it's emotionally indulgent, right?
Right. Like it's
Because you could
indulgent in the
be,
sense of
yeah.
like Wilbur's poetry tells us the lie that like this emotion is pure and true in this moment and can't be undone. Like this is just
Okay.
the emotional reality of this moment. And I feel like Auden never really takes a break from having that intellectual response to emotional realities. I would never
Yes.
accuse Auden of just wordplay for wordplay, though of
Sure.
course he's an expert at wordplay, so is
Yeah,
Larkin.
yeah, yeah.
So we wouldn't be poets if we weren't.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But
of course, yeah. It's a question of degree. Yeah.
I think like I was reflecting on this because I thought it might come up, but I think the best poem to kind of understand where my framework comes from for this is The More Loving One
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
by
yeah.
Auden,
Yeah.
which if your readers aren't super up to that one,
Do you have it?
um,
Do you want to read it?
I do.
Yeah.
Looking up at the stars, I know quite well that for all they care, I can go to hell. But on earth, indifference is the least we have to fear from man or beast. How should we like it were stars to burn with a passion for us we could not return? If equal affection there cannot be, let the more loving one be me. And I think in a Wilbur poem, it stops there.
Yeah.
In a Wilbur poem, it says, I will be the more loving one for the stars.
Right.
And like, I don't need that to be returned to me. That's a complete emotion.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But then there's another stanza that you don't really need, technically, formally,
Yeah.
in the Auden poem, which is, admirer though I think I am of stars that do not give a damn, I cannot, now I see one, say I missed one terribly, all day. Were all
Yeah.
stars to disappear or die, I could learn to love an empty sky and feel its total dark sublime, though this might take me a little time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
that like accountability of like, okay, so I'm asking the stars to love me as an individual when I don't love them as an individual. And could they live
Yeah.
without all of us? Yes. And could I live without all of them? Yes. Right. And it also goes into kind of queering the love poem in a way, right? Where like it is an
Yeah.
anonymous, especially at the turn of the century, kind of love, and it's something that you have to be prepared to live without. Right. So it's a
Yeah.
very, very subtle kind of interrogation of what you can expect from the natural world, what we love about the natural world, what we expect to have mirrored back to us. And then if it's not, that's gonna have to be enough.
Well,
Right.
and what we can expect from love too.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think like I what I love about On is finding those false bottoms. He's always investigating the bottom to say like, is this the bottom? Like, is this the true
Yeah.
end of this poem, or is it not? Right. And I feel like he's great at pushing past those false conclusions into greater complications, even if it's messy.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. So for you, the distinction is that Wilbur is more of a pure lyric poet, and Auden is more intellectually curious and won't and is not satisfied with a pure lyric.
I think he's not satisfied. I think he's intellectual. I think he's messy.
Yeah.
I think he's more interested in the repercussions of emotion than just in satisfying the description of emotion or encapsulating or conveying or evoking an emotion. And I think Wilbur is neat. He
Yeah.
works neat. I think he's surgical in a sense that he's very precise about what he presents to you and how. And the pacing of a poem and like the structure of the image so that it lands where it needs to land to get across and capture and convey and evoke an emotion. But I don't think he's as concerned with if the emotion is a lasting truth. I mean, Auden went through his entire collected and removed all the poems that he felt weren't true
What
before
is
it came to light.
right? Do you think that was a good choice? Like,
I think
what do
it's
you,
kind
yeah.
of a beautifully absurd choice, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Like if you look at his songs from China, which is not what they're called in the collected, I forget what they're called in the collected. It's like major changes,
Yeah.
right?
Are
Like
they
if
good
you read,
changes?
I mean, I think so.
Okay. All right. All right. All right. Yeah.
But
Okay. Good.
but I think it's worth noticing, that like he was always striving to make something he felt was true and coherent and reflective of his best effort at the moment, right? Like he was not, it's almost like he didn't want the poems to stand on their own. Like he wanted to continue to iterate, make them as true as they could be. Even if that meant sacrificing some of the prettier
Yeah.
images or some of the flourish of like sonnets from China, like that has a certain kind of
Yeah.
energy
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
it that
Yeah.
I don't
But
know.
he couldn't stand letting a an emotional a line of emotional excess lie as it had fallen. Like he couldn't leave it alone. He had to go
Right.
in and
Even if it was like, even if it resonated well with readers, it's like,
right.
even if nobody would have noticed that that's a loose end, like he would continue to pull at it.
It had to like it was still answerable to his own current sense of honesty.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's like kind of like, I don't know if you've ever like it's pretty well documented he was on speed, right? So
Oh
like,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't think that's a
right.
secret or a surprise.
So like for like probably latent ADHD or I mean, I'm
Sure. Yeah.
hypothesizing, right? But like let's say he had
And that was
something
not
like
all he
that.
was on either. He was on
Oh no, he was
yeah.
on a lot of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But also like that kind of obsessive fixation on like, is this the bottom of it? Right? Is this the
Right.
truth of it? Is this the emotion that I'm trying to get to? And what does that mean if it is? Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Can I clean a little more mildew off this grout? Right.
Right. He's like over the corner trying to sweep up
Yeah,
some
yeah.
walls.
Toothbrushing the tiles. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And everybody's like, I think it's pretty good.
Yeah. Those aren't tiles on. We're outside right now. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I think that makes sense. So all right, in like in these sort of dichotomies, like critical dichotomies, and he has another one we'll get to in a minute that I'm also interested in hearing your thoughts on. But I like typically in good versions of these dichotomies, it's not as simple as one option is good and the other is bad. Like they have strengths
No.
and weaknesses. So
Right.
would you, it sounds though to me as if, I mean, partly because you very much align yourself with Auden in this split. Is there an advantage to being a Wilbur?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of like low key wish I was a Wilbur, like
Oh,
to be
okay.
real. Like
Okay.
I think it's just like a lot. When I read a Wilbur poem, I think about I feel the way he wants me to feel. It always resonates with my heart,
Yeah.
right? It always makes me pull in a direction that's distinct and unified. I never have to, I rarely, I'll say, have to scrabble for my dictionary or like,
Mhm.
I don't have to go track down what obscure form he's using.
Right.
Like it's very to the heart of the matter. But I think it is a little bit less ambitious. I think like the real
Yeah.
crux of it is ambition.
Okay.
Because I mean, Auden we know for like the short lyric, like beautiful poems, like in the middle of his career,
Right.
because he wrote some crazy, awful shit later in his career.
Yeah.
But before he got like, I think one of his first or second full length books, like the verse plays, for the time being, on a retelling of the Christmas story, where it's set in like post World War I New York,
Yeah.
and it tells the account of Joseph trying to tell the angel like, tell me, give me one proof that what Mary is telling me is true, and he's just like, no. And like flies away. He's like, no, I'm not going to tell you that, you know
Yeah.
or you get, is it, who was it who ordered the murder of the innocents? That
Herod.
Pilate? Herod,
Herod,
right.
yeah. And
The
King Arthur, by the
closing,
way. He had his own. Yeah.
I did not know. The
Yeah,
closing
because
monologue.
he was for him he fathered a son on his sister,
Oh,
and he then when he realized that he ordered that all the babies be slaughtered, but his
that's
son
one
got away, Mordred, and he ended up being the one who killed him. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
that's one way to do it, I guess. The closing monologue of For a Time Being is Herod explaining in like this very like neocon liberal way of how you can't have people running around believing in magic. He's trying to create a civilized society out of these people. And like, what if it were true? What if this is, some magical child who's been born? He can't have that. Right. And it's just like, it's such a crazy thought experiment. And as somebody who was raised in like very structured religious home, it was like a really striking idea to me that like, oh, this rhetoric that I agree with, that we should move more in tandem with science and more toward
Right,
progress, and can be twisted in such a way, right? And like it's in prose, like it's not written in
right, right.
verse.
With that kind of
Um,
speech, yeah, that's an essentially prosaic speech, right? It has to be in prose.
right, it has to be. And so, but that's the kind of undertaking like that Wilbur would not do. 'Cause
Yeah,
he might do the poem about like Joseph having to find faith on his own because not God not coming to him to reassure him,
right.
right? but getting to the
Yeah,
point
yeah.
of like justifying an infanticide, you know,
Right.
like
Yeah, yeah.
that's like the thought experiment goes beyond the pale, right? It goes a
Yeah.
step too far almost.
And like I mean Wilbur's ambitious in the sense that he will like take famous classic plays in French and then endeavor to translate them into perfect, beautiful English,
Hmm.
preserving, meter and rhyme, and yeah, and then succeed.
Yeah,
But it's a very different kind of ambition.
right. It's like the bounds of the ambition, right? Like,
So, all right. So, if I take you at your word that your own preferences aside, there genuinely are advantages to either of the options. Can you name us some Audens and some Wilburs?
yeah, let's do this.
Austin Allen's an Auden, I think.
I could agree with that. I think that Jan Dubrow is an
Okay.
Auden.
All right.
I think Caitlin Doyle is probably a Wilbur.
Okay. Ryan is like Ryan might be like an Auden who's trying to be a Wilbur, or like a Wilbur who's
Solidly a Wilbur.
he's solid. Oh, Ryan's a Will. Oh, okay. Because he certainly has some of the like intellectual ambition of Auden, but he may be like too deeply good a person, or like too like deeply sincere. So I don't know, something like, but yeah, that
Right,
makes sense.
there's some level of
Yeah, yeah,
sincerity there. There's some level
yeah,
of
yeah.
like, can I close it with a bow?
Right, right, right. I think. I mean,
Right.
I think I'm pretty squarely a Wilbur. I don't like. I don't know. Like, I certainly don't feel that way in temperament or like spirit, but I think lyrically, that's probably a whole lot closer to what I. Joshua Meegan, I could. Is he?
He's
He's
not
so
him, I think.
beautifully shaped. Like, but his. Yeah, I don't know. I was gonna say like it may be that his style is Wilbur, but his attitude is Auden. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. I think especially if you take the orange bottle into
Oh
account,
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah, 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 yeah.
that,
Certainly.
then
Yeah,
that's like yeah, that's
yeah,
for sure in the Auden camp.
yeah. Is Stallings a Wilbur?
Hmm.
Yeah, that seems right.
Marilyn Hacker would be Auden, I think.
Okay. Marilyn Nelson is probably a Wilbur. Though there are moments of, I mean, that's the thing, is like, as with all of these, there's a spectrum and there's balance.
Ernest Hilbert is a Wilbur.
Yeah, I think that's true.
What do you say of
Uh,
David Yazzie?
that's what I was thinking of. Yezi, again, he may be like Ryan. Like, he may be a Wilbur who dreams of being an Auden sometimes.
That's
I don't
true.
know. I think Stephen Campa may be an Auden who dreams of being a Wilbur.
Yes.
Is R.S. Gwynn an Auden, or is he just a Wilbur masquerading as an Auden, or I don't know,
He's a witty Wilbur.
a witty
We'll
Wilbur? Okay, I
put
mean
it that
Wilbur
way.
was witty.
He
Well,
was
yeah,
witty.
but
Just look
maybe
at the
maybe like
riddles.
yeah, maybe yeah. I mean maybe like Gwynn. Maybe a different way to put it would be like Sam Gwynn is a funny Wilbur. Like,
Yeah, that would be a good way to put it,
yeah, yeah,
actually.
yeah. All right.
Yeah. Andrew Hudgens, I might put him as Audeny.
I don't
I don't
know.
know.
I did sit down at a bar with him recently, and I forgot, like, he is just incredibly fucking funny in person. Like,
He
he's just
is, yeah.
so yeah, he and his wife actually together, like, they're like a great vaudeville team.
They,
And just brutal to each other, but in the most entertaining
right.
way. Do you know Maury Creech's work?
No, I'm not as familiar.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, he is very ambitious, and like he's constantly like breaking his own bones in like refusing to continue doing the same thing. So I actually feel like he may be an Auden. He may be like a self-made Auden. I don't know. Like, there's something. Yeah. Do you know
Makes
Shane
sense.
McRae's work?
Shame to cry. Not enough to make a call.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think he may be like the opposite of Joshua Meegan, and like his style may be Auden, but his attitude is Wilbur.
Maybe so. I would say that we already covered Stallings, right?
Yeah,
She just got that Oxford
yeah, yeah,
appointment,
yeah,
which
yeah,
is
yeah.
exciting.
It is. Yeah, my case for her. I mean, I was excited for her regardless because I'm a fan. But my case on the show was that I have the hardest time predicting what her lectures will be.
Mm,
Like of the various
yeah.
candidates, it was easier to anticipate what each of them might be up to for 15 lectures. With her, I don't know. Like, it's not like she's going to do 15 lectures on like why you should try rhyme, like I don't know. I don't know what she's going to do. And so I'm eager to, find out. And I think it may be like, I mean, I, I think it may be an opportunity for her not to know, like for her to be like, oh shit, no, I got to do it,
Oh
like,
shit.
yeah, and
Yeah.
just sort of figure, discover what it's going to be. So
I
no,
love
I'm
that.
very eager.
I love that.
Yeah, who among does it now? Does this mostly apply to contemporary, like roughly like living formal poets, or is it? Can we can't push it backwards because Wilbur's still kind of a poet of the present. Do you know Amit Majumdar's work?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I would put him under Auden.
Okay, that makes sense, but yeah, there's a tension there as well.
There is a
Like,
tension there as
yeah,
well.
but
Like
I think you're right. I think he probably is an Auden.
his like tension of mind, right, as he moves
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
through different options.
But he is
I
he is
think
really committed to that dialectical. Like he won't sit still in an emotional
right.
conclusion. Yeah, that's
And
quite
I
true.
think
Yeah.
that's the point, is like with an Auden poet, you see the mind at work in the poem.
Mhm.
And with a Wilbur poet, it is complete, and that's why it's a poem.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like there's not a lot of movement up and down. There may be movement in the emotional articulation of it,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
but the heart of it, the feeling stays the same.
Part of it is, I mean, I know both Wilbur and Auden were Christians, at least Auden for parts of his life. But I do feel like Wilbur's outlook is sunny and Auden's is I mean, he is remarkably cheerful in his essays, but like his outlook is pretty jaundiced much of the time, and that's where I think like that's the less interesting but maybe deceptive dichotomy, because I think like Ahmet Majmudar has an extremely sunny outlook, but he has his practice is very Auden-esque, whereas like I have a very jaundiced outlook, but my practice is more Wilbur, right?
Right,
Like
right,
it was like if Wilbur were a nihilist, or like that's
right,
yeah,
exactly.
okay,
Right. It's not tied to a disposition. It's a way of maneuvering the tools we have, right? Like as poets.
okay. So I'm curious, do you use this as a do you ever use this as a guide for yourself? Like, do you ever use this as a test of a poem you're working on?
Yeah, all the
Okay,
time.
okay,
Like sometimes I'll write a draft and I'm not sure if it's good or bad. And I'll apply like the false bottom test and I'll try to start a new poem with just the last two lines.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And a lot of times that's really fruitful to move the lines to the beginning rather than at the end. That's just like a small trick.
So,
And
but
like leave everything else
that's not a false
behind.
bottom. That's like a whole like rather you're not saying like add a quatrain to the end.
No, I'm saying
You're
like what
saying like
happens if everything goes away?
okay, all right,
Like did I write my way into this emotion or is this emotion present throughout, right?
right.
And
That's
like,
like an iceberg test almost.
yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, or like a runway. Like everything up until now was just preparation to write these last two lines.
Right. Like I lost a bet last year, a couple years ago to a friend, and she made me, I lost. And so my wager, her wager to me was that if I lost, I had to write a sincere poem about our friendship. And it couldn't
What?
be funny. It had to be like sincere.
Oh
Like I
man.
appreciate it. Yeah, it was rough. But in the end I did it. And in
Yeah.
the end I really liked it. But I liked the last couplet most of all. It was of course a sonnet. That's the only thing to do in that
Okay. Yeah.
situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, man, I just wish it were all the couplet. And so then I went back and tried to write it as all the couplet.
How'd that go?
It went well. It was an
Okay.
ecotone recently.
Oh, all right.
So
So yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Good. What was her wager?
I asked her to buy me a bottle of whiskey. Like I was like so I was so low stakes
You were
about it.
very
I was so
mercenary. Yeah.
chill. He was like going for the throat.
Yeah. That's one of those like Andrew Jackson. The story was like he would challenge men to duels all the time, but his strategy was just to wait and like let them fire off their shot and then take his time.
Oh
Yeah.
my
So yeah,
God.
she got you pretty good.
You sure did, yeah.
All right, so you mentioned this, the Dyer's Hand, as you said, it's a collection of great. It's, I had never read it. I read these first three essays, or almost all of them. Well, I just literally got it in the mail today, and they're totally delicious. Like the first two, reading and writing, are truly just a collection of aphorisms.
Right. And I
Yeah,
love it. I love how it's like written by someone on speed. We're like, that's a good idea. And then
yeah.
the next paragraph is also, this is a good idea. But then they have nothing to do with each other.
No, nothing.
It's like
For two straight essays, it's just like
for
it's
two straight essays.
they're
It's
not
just
essays.
like
They're just
it's like here's a thing that's true. All
yeah,
right,
yeah,
here's
yeah,
another
yeah.
thing that's true. I adore
Yeah.
it. It's like totally my speed. Like,
No,
yes, I'm all about it.
it's no, they're really quite delicious. I mean, the third one, making, knowing, and judging, is more unified, but it still has some of that aphoristic quality where like he can't help but just have like a dazzling sort of standalone paragraph here and there. Do you want to pull out? Because I found myself like I dog-eared literally almost every single page of both of those first two essays.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
feel like I was like underlining aphorisms either because they so perfectly articulated something that I had suspected or felt or intuited, or because they really beautifully articulated something that seemed to me totally wrong, but really interesting.
Okay.
So I'm curious, like, do you have some favorite lines or favorite aphorisms out of here, or are there
Yeah,
things that we should talk about in particular?
I think my biggest takeaway from this, not my biggest takeaway, one of my favorite takeaways from this is that Auden's Desert Island book is the dictionary.
Yeah, yeah, yes,
That's
yeah,
just absurd. Who does that, right? But like the more you think about it, you're like, well, maybe for the OED,
right, yeah. Maybe
like
there's
maybe.
26 volumes of yeah,
Does that
right,
count? Maybe it
yeah, yeah,
counts.
yeah.
I don't know.
Uh,
I will tell you something that's haunted me about
okay,
this first like writing prologue that has forever become like a ghost in my consciousness. It's most people enjoy the sight of their own handwriting as they enjoy the smell of their own farts.
yeah, yeah. And he's talking specifically, but like it's interesting because I've heard the opposite of the argument he makes there, made more recently. He says you have the bit he says about hand, like longhand versus the typewriter
Yeah, yeah,
text.
yeah. It's much as I loathe the typewriter, I must admit that it is help in self-criticism. TypeScript is so impersonal and hideous to look at that if I type out a poem, I immediately see the defects which I missed when I looked through it in manuscript. When it comes to writing, when it comes to a poem by somebody else, the severest test I know of is to write it out in longhand. The physical tedium of doing this ensures the slightest defect will reveal itself. The hand is constantly looking for an excuse to stop.
Yeah, no, I mean
Yeah.
which is wonderful, but it like the argument I've heard is that computer like word processors too too readily make a rough draft look like a finished poem.
Right.
So and I don't know. I mean, I know maybe one or two writers who write longhand still for the most part. Um, I mean, I certainly do most. I will write poetry longhand sometimes, or I'll write it in my head and then type it up. But I do, a lot of it I just type straight into the computer. Are you a disciple of Auden? Do you use longhand, or do you type directly?
I swipe.
You
Actually,
swipe?
I draft all my poems on my phone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is like next level 21st century, I feel like.
That
But I
seems so
do.
difficult because like I always hit the wrong letter. Like I can't type a single word on my phone without hitting a wrong letter and having it autocorrect me.
Here's why I like it. I like because I can look at it anywhere.
Yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah.
always have the most recent draft.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to like remember from memory what I did with the transition from foot 2 to 4 in line 8 when
Yeah.
I'm revising in my head. I can just pull it up and take a glance and say, oh yeah, that was good. Or oh no, that is terrible.
Yeah.
Um, so I write a lot on my phone. And then like
Okay.
I'll bring it into a word processor when I feel like it's ready to send out. or to be formalized.
Yeah, yeah. But definitely it doesn't have it's not visually intoxicating in a phone.
No, it's ugly,
Yeah.
right?
So
So you have to like
right, yeah.
really, you have to really like it to like it in the terrible Apple sans serif
Yeah, yeah.
font,
Yeah, and
you
like with the
know?
line breaks all fucked up and that, yeah.
Right. I've noticed my
Yeah,
lines like getting shorter and shorter. I
yeah.
can't stand for the rap text. But like I'll make notes in my head and be like, when I put in the word processor, I'll be like, okay, now I can have whatever line I want.
Yeah, okay. All right.
The thing that stuck with me about this is like I read this once, I forget when, like early in my poetry career, 2008.
Okay.
I read this book. And so this idea that people enjoy the sight of their handwriting as they enjoy the smell
Yeah.
of their farts got transmogrified in my mind into being like, if you like your own poems, you like your own farts. And that became a problem.
Right. People like if as if it were not handwriting but writing.
Like it became like a little embarrassing to me to like be like, yeah, I like that one. Like it's just, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I very much share his feeling about past work when he says that like a writer
Mm,
has, I mean, for me it's not if you basically, like he said, like if you bother to think about your past work, it's mostly to worry over its faults, right? Like
right,
you certainly
right,
don't look back and say like, boy, that was a great one. It's more like, oh god, I can't believe I published that.
right. And then like, but later in the Making, Knowing, and Judging, his chapter, that's his Oxford lecture, his first one.
Mhm.
He says, having spent 20 years learning to be himself, he finds he must now start learning not to be himself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that you don't just keep just imitating yourself. Do
Right.
you have, what are your feelings on that? Because this is, like, I've made a joke before that like a poet, like when a poet turns 40, he becomes a young poet. Before that, you're basically a juvenile or whatever.
Right.
But like, do you feel yourself like in tension with like, do you feel yourself having to like think about writing in a different way or avoiding traps of writing or of habit? Is that something that you worry about at all, or what?
Yeah, for sure. For me, End of These Knots came out when I was 23.
Jesus Christ. Okay, yeah.
So yeah, that was something to try to write past, right? And figure out like
Right,
what
right.
is I just found my voice, so
Yeah.
what now, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but it's been a journey for sure. But I do kind of I get in bouts where like if I write another poem about this, I'm just gonna die. If I write another love
Yeah.
poem, I think I'm gonna throw up.
Right.
And so you kind of push in different directions. But I think it's also important to like one thing, like I was very when any of these apps came out, I was like kind of almost like shocked. I was like, what? Like this is not
Right.
supposed to happen this way. Like this is supposed to be happening 5 or 10 years from now.
Yeah.
And so it was really comforting to me, actually. I was at Westchester, the poetry conference, and
Mhm.
I'd met David for the first time, who was running that prize series. And he said, do you know why we picked Into These Knots? And I was like, no, but I would love to, right? Like, please
Yeah,
tell
yeah.
me. And what he told me then, I don't know if this is true or not true, or if this is just something he thought would encourage me. He said it was the rhythm,
Oh,
right? Like it was like the promotions and demotions and the really kind of like roughshod rhythms that I would
right.
use. And that was so freeing for me because it was like, okay, that's something that's really intrinsic to who I am as a poet and the kind of
Yeah.
sound and the kind of musicality I like to get out of iambic pentameter.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah.
not something I can fuck up because that's just like how I hear it.
Right, right.
That's how I like it. Right. Like, so I think there's a real sometimes disconnect, especially among writers who haven't quite figured out who they are yet. There's a disconnect between like style, things like how your meter scans,
Right.
or like how many headless lines you use, or what you do with the second foot, when you're substituting in the first. Like there are things like that that are so like you're just doing them almost subconsciously because that's part of the rhythm you hear. And then there are conscious things like love, God, and death, right? And that's like what you're going to write about. And I
Yeah.
think we get so caught up in like the the content choices we're making, the thematic choices we're making, and like not making that repetitive that we don't think about the fact that I often have a caesura in the middle of my second line,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you
So
know?
yeah, yeah, yeah. The style is not the, so long as it doesn't become like a fetish, style is not the thing to fear. It's
Right.
is it like, is it obsession? Is it like repetition? I mean, what is it that, what is the trap? What is the quicksand then?
I think the quicksand is really just like thinking that because you've had some measure of like success about writing love poems, that now you can't write about um prehistorical burial rituals from the ancient Near East,
Sure. Yeah.
which is where I went immediately after into these thoughts. I'm like, let's go.
Let's check out some dead Neanderthals. Yeah.
Let's talk about some dead people in the sand. I think I was so afraid of like just becoming that person who always talked about the same stuff
Right.
that I didn't think about that my voice may not be a content. My voice may be a rhythm. My
Yeah. Yeah.
voice may
Yeah.
be a
Yeah.
style of rhyme. My voice may be a structure or like a
Yeah.
an unsettled mind that won't go for the easy ending, right? Like, or maybe something that's emotional clarity. I think there's just such a limitation to how we think of a writer's voice.
What is
Does
that?
that make sense?
I mean, I have always been a little puzzled by the idea of finding one's voice or defining voice. I mean, I can. Shane in a recent episode made a sort of a strong point about, significant poets being really distinctive in their voice, and I think that it's a fairly convincing claim, but it's also something that I just have a very hard time identifying or understanding. I certainly don't feel as if I've found my voice. How do you think? I mean, what are we talking about when we talk about a poet's voice? You said you found your voice before into these knots. So did that feel like? Did you have a feeling like, okay, I like, here's what it is?
I think at the time I thought it was a point of view. Like this is a point
Mm,
of view that I
okay.
have on my life or on the world around me or on whatever I gaze upon falls under my point of
Yeah, yeah,
view. And so that's who I am as a poet. And I think it's really less about that and more about the how. Like less about the what, more about the how.
yeah. Okay.
Right? Like I would know a Hardy poem, even if it weren't about, Sussex, because of the way it's
Sure.
structured, because of the way it
Yeah,
pays
yeah.
attention to, relationships and emotions and the natural world, right? Like
The sometimes slavish rhyme and the like like perversely indifferent
cumbersome
meter at
like
times. Yeah,
stanzas. Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Hardy's so great.
He is such a specific kind of, like, he's just such a specific weirdo that, yeah,
Yeah.
it would be hard to, mistake. Yeah, I don't know. I'm very we were having a conversation with Ryan about this where he talked about acquiring a style as a poet, and I said, like, yeah, but do you want to acquire, like, isn't it dangerous to acquire a style? And his response was like, Ryan, it is most Gene Wilder, Willy Wonka-ish. He just said, not if it's a good one. Not if it's a good style. Like, if it's a good style, then like, what are you fucking complaining about?
I would say that what it matters if it's a whether it's a good style, whether it's a bad style, having a set style in which you treat your subject matter risks becoming a circus act, right? Like risks become something where you can't acknowledge things that fall outside of the spotlight
Mhm.
of your circus act, right? So I think a good poet is like walking around the edges of the circus act and expanding that.
So, and maybe like
Um,
one of the tests of a style is whether there are subjects at which it falters, like whether there are kinds of poems, or like whether there
like
are
things it shies
yeah,
away from, or like,
yeah, is there a subject it would become ridiculous to write about in this style?
I don't know.
But then there are also like, I don't know, there's certain poets do have, as Alice talked, like poets do have their obsessions, and you don't necessarily want poems on all things by all poets.
No, you don't. Like, you wouldn't want Sharon Olds at your autopsy, right? Like that would
I'm not sure I'd want her at
look.
like any major life event, because I wouldn't want, it's like, oh geez, I can't, I don't want to read this poem.
I think it just kind of, I mean, and I would maybe put this back to you, like, if there are certain limitations to a style, like say formalism
Mhm.
or received forms, are there occasions that formal poets can't write about, right? Or
Right.
shouldn't, or where it would become grotesque to try, right?
Yeah, there is. I mean, there are definitely, because I really enjoy conventional writing in a number of different venues. I write some prose, I write some criticism, fiction, poetry. I for a long time I wrote plays, dialogue, and I do think sometimes about, like, if I'll have a notion that feels like it could be a poem-sized notion, or at least like the good beginning of a poem. Sometimes I kind of ask, like, does this want to be a poem that I could write, or would it rather be an essay? Would it rather be a rant on the podcast? Would it rather be something else? And I don't. Yeah, I think
Right.
I think there probably are. Yeah, I mean, I
For
certainly
me,
think there are
that
limitations to my style, but yeah, I'm not sure if I have them mapped very well yet.
for me, that brings it back to autumn, right? Of like that clear expression of mixed emotions.
Hmm.
If I feel very strongly one way or the other, like that's not a poem for me that
Hmm.
I can write, right? Like if I have a clear understanding of how I feel and I feel like fully justified and there's no way I want to question or interrogate that, that's not a poem for me.
That was this week's show. Thank you all for listening. Thank you to Ashley. I don't think she's on. Maybe she's on Twitter. I don't know. She's not real. She's not like a real social media type. I don't think, because she's got better things to do, as you should know very well by now. Again, if you'd like to hear the second half of our conversation, go to sleerickets.substack.com and sign up for the secret show, or just put your email address in, and I'll give you a week's access for free. That episode should be up in a few days. If you'd like to reach me, you can write to me at sleerickets@gmail.com. And with any luck, I will be speaking to you again very soon. Until then.